I'm glad for being here. And first of all, maybe to Wim and Wim. My dad is called Wim. So you're happy. So, well, it was possible when I was a boy that my name was also be Wim. But well, unfortunately, but I think it's not unfortunately, I'm a girl. And what I see, and also in this audience, I think that the financial services will be more and more toys for girls as well. So I'm very glad of that. And I would like to thank Costa for his really inspiring story. Thank you so much. And it gives me an opportunity maybe to, in the next event, to change my high heels for flip-flops as well. But let's start. Well, let's say exactly the time around 1 year ago, when I was still in my previous job, I entered the boardroom of Schiphol Airport for a meeting to decide on a new path for growth. Schiphol is an airport that if you ever traveled through it, and I think you have, you must have been impressed by it. And the reason why I'm so impressed by Schiphol Airport is simply that it is always put giving talented people freedom to innovate in front and center. And that's always found its way to policymakers to make sure rules don't become barriers, but keep competition really fair. And shortly after that meeting, I received a phone call to inform me that I would soon become member of the European Parliament. And here I am. 1 year later, how my life, well, looks from a distance maybe changed drastically, but from a close point of view, it's barely changed at all. Because just as I worked at Schiphol Airport and before that at the Port of Rotterdam, I'm still too fortunate to work on unleashing people's entrepreneurship and to push for innovation in our economies. And that's what I want to talk about today as well. Because regardless of the big, slow, impenetrable bureaucracy that Brussels can be, I have found it also be the place with an incredible drive to innovate and to push a lot of boundaries. And for example, of course, fintech. Even before fintech became a topic of a broad public debate, it was already discussed intensely here in Brussels. Both the very well-organized bank, well, and some of you are here, and the more hybrid startup scene impressed me with their ambitious and in most cases also very concrete actions. I see a lot of banks, sometimes centuries old, moving from a traditional banking model to a model that is more flexible, well, and let's say also adapted to the need of the modern consumer. And I see also a lot of startups and big tech disrupting a financial system that indeed was yearning for a major update. But yes, to be honest, Brussels truly is also slow bureaucracy. And like in other jurisdictions, the EU legislative process goes from, well, a good idea, to an action plan, to an impact assessment, to a minor commission proposal, to some weird amendments, to a trilogue deal, and then starting over again to a grand review. I see some people in the audience nodding in agreement, so you sort of recognize this process. The time this takes is not always available to us in this really dynamic market. So on the one hand, in my opinion, we should try to speed up as much as possible to remove the barriers and unleash the new technologies and innovation to make Europe, in my opinion, the most innovative continent on Earth. And that's possible, in my opinion. And on the other side, the European legislation is not easily reversible. So we should be very careful in what we are doing. I would like to make a step forward and talk about what we should working on. And let's start with, well, let's say these cute and sympathetic startups with CEOs that could have lived next door and can do the programming themselves. I'm quite jealous of that. But well, jokes aside, these businesses deserve our attention. In the end, all the main corporations you present started somewhere in an attic or in your mom's sewing room. Projects that are the most of the time not easy to finance, since prospects are not always rock valid, as banks would like them to be. And this is why I support the Commission's proposal for a union framework for crowdfunding. And I will come back to this later on. But first, banks and fintech startups. As related as they are, I have found that banks and fintechs quite often simply don't speak the same language. Bankers are used to ask lots of risk management questions about what happens when things go south. The need to ensure that risk bank is exposed to is well defined and properly managed. For a good reason, of course. And there are still too many loans on the balance sheets that are not performing as they should. As bankers are rewarded, luckily, for preventing things from going wrong and not for taking risks that can transform and grow into something new. Innovation suffers. And in contrast, what's successful in fintech is taking risk as well. And fintech should not be a threat for banks. And I would really like to underline this. If it's a threat, it means that this bank is lagging behind. And the distinction between the traditional financial institutions and the newcomers will become more and more fuzzy, I think. And these developments come with their challenges, not only for the financial sector, but also for the European legislators, the regulators and the supervisors. Still, what we care about most is the financial stability. We will not give in on that. And that's really what I would like to emphasize. Regulation should be based on activity, not on a legal activity or a legal entity. This comes together in the mantra you all know: same services, same risks, same rules. And that should be the mantra. And let's go back to let's say the garage-style startups. In its FinTech action plan, the Commission proposed an EU framework for SMEs that, let's explain that want to raise some of their capital through crowdfunding. And that's a proposal I fully support, and I hope you will do that as well. As an important part of the Capital Market Union, it enhances non-bank investments, and that alone benefits the financial markets in the Union. To me, there should be no hard line between crowdfunding and the more traditional financing through credit institutions. Actually, what I hope is that all these approaches can become more and more complementary. And what's our aim? I think it's quite simple. Our aim is to finalize the file before the end of our mandate. So we have still, 7 months to go. So we have to make sure that we open up our capital markets for crowdfunding as soon as possible. And finally, although the hype seems to be over, any discussion about innovation in the financial sector is, of course, incomplete without virtual currencies. And some of my colleagues in the Parliament tried to use the crowdfunding dossiers to push for immediate regulation of the ICOs, the initial coins offerings, or even a complete inclusion of virtual currencies in the MiFID. And I definitely see the merits of an approach in which European legislation will facilitate innovative technologies, but I would therefore call on the Commission to assess how these virtual currencies should be regulated. Because since the legal certainty of regulated framework, it can be instrumental in increasing investors' and consumers' protection. And it can also reduce risk stemming from asymmetric information, fraudulent behaviors, and illegal activities as money laundering or also tax avoidance. I think that a few more rules here would not amount to a barrier. But let's put it a little bit more robust before a quick and dirty approach. Leaving room for a facilitating approach to new technologies by national and also by the European competent authorities, combined, in my opinion, with a more comprehensive strategy for a future legal framework is the way how it should go. As far as money laundering or tax avoidance is concerned, there is no reason to delay. This should be the top priority, both for this Commission and also for the new Commission. So let's end. Building on my experience at Schiphol Airport and also at the Port of Rotterdam, I think I have my work for, well, the remaining months of my mandate set out. The things I would like to do is to facilitate growth, to enable innovation, and unleash the untapped potential Europe still has in her. And a big part in that, it's quite simple. That's you. Thank you so much.